The smell of stale coffee and frying bacon was a world away from the sterile, ozoned air of her corner office. Eleanor Vance sat in a worn vinyl booth, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, the ceramic chipped at the rim. It was an anonymous diner off a forgotten highway, a deliberate escape from the crushing weight of her own name. She wore jeans and a simple gray sweater, a costume of normalcy she donned whenever the gilded cage of her life became too small. Then the bell above the door jangled, not with the friendly chime of a local, but with a discordant, heavy clang. 5 men clad in leather vests bearing the snarling skull of the Hells Angels swaggered in. They filled the small space with an unspoken menace, their laughter harsh and loud. Their eyes swept the room, dismissing the few other patrons before landing on her, the lone woman. They moved toward her booth, a slow, predatory circle. The leader, a man with a beard braided into greasy ropes, leaned over her table, his knuckles brushing the worn formica. "Well, well, what's a pretty thing like you doing all alone?" Eleanor didn't look up from her cup. Her heart hammered a steady, cold rhythm against her ribs, a familiar drumbeat of control in the face of chaos. "I'm enjoying my coffee." "We can be company," another sneered, sliding into the booth opposite her, trapping her against the window. The others hemmed her in, their presence a physical wall. She finally lifted her gaze, her eyes the color of a winter sky, clear, cold, and vast. There was no fear in them, only a profound weariness. She placed her phone on the table, its sleek black case a stark contrast to the grimy surroundings. With a single, deliberate tap, she activated the speakerphone and dialed a number from memory. It rang once. "Security," a clipped voice answered. "This is Vance," she said, her voice calm and even. "I'm at the Starlight Diner on Route 9. There are 5 members of the Hells Angels local chapter currently harassing me. Their names are—" She paused, her eyes flicking to the patches on their vests. "Ripper, Scab, Grease, Tiny, and their leader appears to be Sledge. I'm activating my security protocol. You have 30 seconds to have local and state law enforcement en route before the asset protection team is deployed." "Acknowledge." A beat of silence. "Acknowledged, Ms. Vance. En route." She disconnected the call and looked at the man called Sledge, whose bravado had evaporated, replaced by a pasty, slack-jawed confusion. The others shifted, their blustering confidence deflating like a punctured tire. They had cornered a stray cat and found a sleeping tiger. The name Vance hung in the air, a name synonymous with Vance Industries, a global tech empire. A name that was on Forbes lists and in shareholder reports, a name that could, with a single phone call, make 5 bikers disappear into a vortex of legal and financial ruin. Sledge swallowed hard. "Look, lady, we were just leaving," Eleanor finished for him. They scrambled over each other to get out, the bell on the door sounding a frantic, panicked retreat. The diner was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the quiet gasp from the kitchen doorway. A man in a grease-stained apron stood there holding a spatula like a weapon. Beside him, a little girl with wide, frightened eyes peeked out from behind his legs. He was tall and lean, with kind eyes that were now filled with a mixture of shock and concern. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice gentle. Eleanor's carefully constructed wall of ice began to crack. She looked at the man and the little girl, and for the first time in years, she felt something other than cold control. She felt seen. "Yes," she managed, her voice a little shaky. "Thank you." A week later, Eleanor found herself driving back down Route 9. It was illogical. She had 1,000 more efficient, more luxurious places to get coffee. Yet the memory of the worn diner, of the quiet bravery of its owner, pulled at her. She parked her sleek black sedan, a car worth more than the entire diner, and walked inside. The same man was behind the counter, this time wiping it down with a clean rag. The little girl sat at a booth, coloring in a book with intense concentration. He looked up as the bell chimed, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "You're back," he said, a small, surprised smile touching his lips. "Didn't think we'd see you again." "I was in the area," she lied smoothly. "Coffee, please." He nodded, turning to the pot. "I'm Liam, by the way, and that's my daughter, Lily." Eleanor slid into the same booth she'd occupied before. "Eleanor!" Liam brought the coffee over. "It's on the house, for the entertainment last week." She felt a flush of embarrassment. "That wasn't my intention." "I know," he said, his gaze direct and unassuming, "but you handled it. Most people would have panicked." He gestured to the empty diner. "Things have been quiet since then. Word gets around, I guess." Lily looked up from her coloring book, her big brown eyes studying Eleanor with a child's unfiltered curiosity. She didn't speak, simply held up her drawing. It was a picture of a shining knight in silver armor standing before a group of snarling, lumpy dragons. Eleanor's breath caught. "Is that me?" Lily nodded solemnly, then went back to her coloring. "She doesn't talk much," Liam explained quietly, a shadow of pain crossing his face. "Not since her mom left, but she draws. It's how she says things." An unexpected pang of empathy resonated in Eleanor's chest. She understood silence. She had lived in it for years, a self-imposed exile after her own devastating betrayal. "It's a beautiful drawing," she said, her voice softer than she intended. She looked from the drawing to Liam's work-worn hands, to the genuine concern in his eyes. Here was a world of simple truths and quiet struggles so far removed from her own, where value was measured in scraped knees and crayon masterpieces. A part of her she thought long dead felt a tentative, hopeful flicker. Eleanor's visits became a weekly, then a bi-weekly ritual. She'd sit in her booth working on her tablet, but her focus would inevitably drift to the quiet rhythm of the diner. She learned that Liam was more than just a cook. He was a master mechanic who had bought the diner and the attached garage after his wife left, needing a steady local business so he could always be there for Lily. One rainy afternoon she found him in the garage, staring at the guts of a vintage pickup truck, a look of deep frustration on his face. "Trouble?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. He sighed, wiping a greasy hand across his forehead. "This old beast. It's for Mrs. Gable down the road, her husband's pride and joy before he passed. I promised her I'd get it running again, but the carburetor is shot and the parts are impossible to find." Eleanor looked at the complex, broken machinery. It was a puzzle, and she was good at puzzles. "What's the make and model?" he told her. She tapped the information into her phone. Her corporate life was a whirlwind of hostile takeovers and market projections, but the core of her empire was logistics, finding things, sourcing the impossible. "My wife, Sarah, she loved these old trucks," Liam said, his voice distant. He wasn't talking to Eleanor so much as to the ghost in the garage. She loved the idea of them, the freedom. Then one day she decided she wanted the real thing, packed a bag and just drove away, said this life was too small for her big dreams. He finally looked at Eleanor, his eyes clouded with memory. "I had to choose, chase after her, or stay for Lily. It wasn't a choice, really. Lily is my whole world. I wish I could give her more than this." He gestured around the cluttered garage, a monument to his sacrifice. He had given up his own ambitions, his own life, to build a safe, stable world for his daughter, a world of integrity built on the ruins of his own heart. Eleanor felt a profound, aching respect for him. Her own wealth had been built on ruthlessness, on outmaneuvering competitors, on a singular, selfish focus. Liam's wealth was of a different kind, measured in a little girl's silent trust. 2 days later, a courier van pulled up to the diner. A man delivered a small, heavy box addressed to Liam Garrett. Inside, nestled in foam, was a perfectly refurbished vintage carburetor sourced from a specialty collector in Germany. There was no note. When Eleanor came in the next day, the pickup was purring like a kitten in the garage. Liam met her at the door, his eyes shining with gratitude and something more. "How did you—" "I have good contacts," she said, shrugging it off. That's worth more than a month's profit from the diner," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Eleanor, why?" "Because," she said, meeting his gaze, "you promised Mrs. Gable." It was the simplest, truest thing she had said in a decade. The diner became her sanctuary. Liam would talk about his day, the funny things customers said, Lily's progress at school. Lily, in turn, started leaving drawings for Eleanor at her booth every visit. A flower, a sun, a picture of the three of them holding hands. With them, Eleanor wasn't the CEO. She was just Eleanor, the woman who liked her coffee black and knew how to find rare truck parts. The ice around her heart was melting, drop by painful drop. She started helping in the small garden behind the diner, a patch of earth Liam and Lily had tried to cultivate but had become overgrown with weeds. Her hands, usually accustomed to the smooth glass of a phone screen, learned the feel of cool soil and thorny stems. As they worked side by side, pulling weeds and planting new seeds, Eleanor felt a parallel process happening within her. Old, bitter thoughts were being uprooted, making space for something new and fragile to grow. One evening, as they sat on the back step watching the sunset paint the sky, the quiet intimacy felt safe enough for her to finally unlock her own past. "I wasn't always like this," she began, her voice low. So, guarded. Liam just listened, giving her the space she needed. "I built my company with a partner, Marcus Thorne. We were more than partners, we were engaged. I trusted him with everything, my ideas, my future, my heart." She took a shaky breath. "The night before our IPO, the biggest moment of my professional life, I discovered he had been embezzling funds for months, structuring a shell corporation to siphon off profits. He planned to sell his shares, short the stock, and ruin the company, and me, while he walked away with a fortune." The memory was still a raw, open wound. I confronted him. He didn't even deny it. He just laughed and said, "It's just business, Ellie." That was it. I spent the entire night with my lawyers, restructuring everything, cutting him out, saving the company. I saved it, but something inside me broke. I never trusted anyone like that again. I built walls so high no one could ever get close enough to hurt me. Liam reached over and gently took her hand. His was calloused and warm. Hers felt cold and delicate in his grasp. "He didn't break you, Eleanor. He just made you forget how strong your heart is." As if on cue, a Blacktown car, impossibly sleek and out of place, pulled into the diner's gravel lot. A man in a tailored suit stepped out. Eleanor's blood ran cold. It was Marcus Thorne. He hadn't changed. The same predatory smile, the same arrogant gleam in his eyes. "Ellie," he said, his voice smooth as poison, "it's been a long time. I see you've taken up rustic hobbies." His eyes flicked dismissively over Liam and the humble diner. Marcus was back, and he had found her. Sanctuary. Marcus Thorne hadn't come for a social call. He was now the CEO of a rival tech firm, and he proposed a merger with Vance Industries. It was a power play, a way to force his way back into the world he felt she had stolen from him. The deal he offered was strategically brilliant and financially staggering. The old Eleanor, the one who lived for the kill, would have been thrilled by the challenge. But the new Eleanor felt only a sickening dread. "The board is ecstatic about the proposal," Marcus told her, in her sterile office, the city lights glittering like cold diamonds behind him. "It's the deal of a lifetime, Ellie. Together, we'd be unstoppable." "I will never work with you," she said, her voice flat. His smile turned sharp. "Don't be so sentimental. I've been doing my homework. A little diner on Route 9, a grease monkey and his damaged kid." He slid a file across her desk. It was filled with photos of Liam and Lily, financial reports on the diner, Liam's custody agreement. "This little fantasy of yours?" It's a liability, a weakness. The press would have a field day. Billionaire CEO's blue-collar distraction. It could tank our stock value before the ink is even dry on the merger. He leaned in, his voice a low threat. Walk away from them. Announce the merger with me, and this all stays our little secret. But if you fight me on this, I will bury him. I'll use my resources to open a competing garage across the street and run him out of business. I'll anonymously report him to child services, suggest his financial instability makes him an unfit parent. I will tear his small, pathetic world apart, and you will watch. The threat was absolute. He was using Liam and Lily as leverage, turning her newfound happiness into a weapon against her. He was forcing her to choose the empire she had built, the legacy she had protected for years, or the man and child who had just begun to heal her. The weight of the ultimatum was suffocating. For days, Eleanor was a ghost, haunting her penthouse, the city lights no longer looking like diamonds but like the eyes of 1,000 watching judges. She avoided the diner, unable to face Liam and Lily, knowing her presence in their lives had put them in danger. Every instinct she had honed over a decade screamed at her to protect her company, to fight Marcus on his own terms, to be the ruthless executive she had always been. It was the only way she knew how to survive. But then she thought of Lily's drawings, of the quiet strength in Liam's hands, of the feeling of planting something in the earth and watching it grow. Marcus was offering her the world she knew, a world of power and wealth, but it was a barren, lonely world. Liam and Lily offered a small, fragile garden, but it was real. She finally drove to the diner late one night. Liam was in the garage, working under the hood of a car, the single bare bulb casting long shadows. He looked up when she entered, his face etched with worry. "Eleanor, I was so worried. Are you okay?" The dam inside her broke. Tears streamed down her face as she told him everything, Marcus's reappearance, the merger, the threats. "He'll destroy you to get to me," she whispered, her voice choked with despair. "The safest thing for you and Lily is for me to disappear from your lives, to walk away." Liam listened, his expression hardening when she spoke of Marcus's threats. When she was finished, he gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "So you're going to let him win? You're going to let that man, that ghost from your past, dictate your future? The woman I know doesn't run, the woman who faced down 5 bikers without flinching, who can find a part for a 50-year-old truck from halfway across the world. She doesn't run." He stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "Your life, your company, that's not who you are, it's what you do. Who you are is the woman who helps a little girl with her garden. Who you are is the person I've started to fall in love with. Don't let him take that from us." His words were a lifeline. He wasn't asking her to save him. He was asking her to save herself. The emergency board meeting was held the next morning. The room was tense, the air thick with the scent of money and ambition. Marcus Thorne sat at the opposite end of the long mahogany table, looking smug and victorious. He assumed she had caved. He assumed she would make the logical, profitable choice. Eleanor stood at the head of the table. She looked not at her board, but directly at Marcus. "I have reviewed Mr. Thorne's merger proposal," she began, her voice ringing with a newfound clarity and strength. "And I have a counter-proposal." She projected a document onto the main screen. It wasn't a financial statement, it was an exposé. Working through the night with her most trusted legal team, she had compiled an airtight dossier on Marcus's unethical business practices, including witness tampering from their original split and evidence of current market manipulation. "I will not be merging Vance Industries with a company led by a man as morally bankrupt as Marcus Thorne," she announced. "Instead, I am announcing a hostile takeover bid for Thorne Analytics. And furthermore," she clicked to the next slide, which showed a picture of the Starlight Diner, "I am liquidating 10% of my personal shares in Vance Industries, effective immediately. Gasps filled the room. It was a fortune. The funds, Eleanor continued, her voice unwavering, will be used to establish the Garrett Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing grants and support for small, family-owned businesses in rural communities. Its first recipient will be the Starlight Diner and Garage, ensuring its future indefinitely. This foundation will be my new priority. She was sacrificing a piece of her empire, a chunk of her personal wealth, not for profit, but for principle, for love. It was an act of corporate heresy, a complete rejection of the ruthless values Marcus and this very boardroom represented. Marcus stared at her, his face pale with shock and fury. He had tried to use her heart as a weapon, and she had turned it into a shield and a sword. She had chosen integrity over profit, family over legacy. She hadn't just defeated him in business, she had repudiated his entire worldview. The fallout was immediate. Marcus was disgraced, his company vulnerable, his reputation shattered. The board, while initially shocked, saw the brilliance of her move. She had eliminated a competitor and generated immense public goodwill. But Eleanor cared little for that. She drove straight to the diner. Liam was standing by the door, waiting. He had heard the news. She got out of the car and walked into his arms, burying her face in his chest. He held her tightly, and for the first time, she felt completely safe. "You did it," he murmured into her hair. "We did it," she corrected. Just then, Lily came running out of the diner. She stopped in front of Eleanor, a bright, hopeful look in her eyes. She held up a new drawing. It was of the three of them standing in front of the diner with a huge, smiling sun overhead. Then she looked up at Eleanor, and in a small, clear voice that hadn't been used in years, she said 2 words. "Welcome home." Eleanor knelt and hugged the little girl, tears of pure joy streaming down her face. The last wall around her heart crumbled into dust. 1 year later, the Starlight Diner was thriving. A new, expanded garage buzzed with activity, and the garden behind it was a riot of color. Liam ran the business, but now he had a partner. Eleanor had stepped down as CEO of Vance Industries, taking a role as chairwoman of the board. She spent most of her days at the diner, her hands covered in flour from baking pies or soil from the garden. She had traded her penthouse for the small house behind the diner, its warmth and laughter a stark contrast to the sterile silence she had once called home. Her life was smaller now, but infinitely larger. This evening she, Liam, and a chattering Lily were sitting on the back step, watching the fireflies begin to dot the twilight air. Liam slipped his arm around her, and she leaned her head on his shoulder, a feeling of profound peace settling over her. She had been a billionaire, a CEO, a titan of industry, but she had been starving in a palace of gold. Here, in this small, simple world, she had found true wealth, the kind that couldn't be counted, only felt. True fortune, she now knew, wasn't about what you owned. It was about who you had to come home to.